I'm gonna reroute the thermo drive.
Electronic mail failure.
Stored forever in a virtual library.
Computers can't swim.
They can now.
The data turbines, the website, it's alive.
Movies
And mainframes.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Movies and Mainframes, the podcast that is going to explore and discuss the representation of technology in media. I am your host, Andy, and today I have a very special bonus episode for you all. If you are a listener to the podcast, you will know that last week, me and Kevin Sparenberg sat down and talked about Jurassic Park. Yes, the Steven Spielberg blockbuster classic. It was a fun conversation. If you have not listened to it, I encourage you to go back in the feed and listen to it now. And you might know that a couple of months ago, I got to sit down and interview two gentlemen by the names of Mann and Alex Mann. I talked to them about the work that they did on 1995's The Net, starring Sandra Bullock. They worked as technical consultants on that film, but they also worked from the mid-90s to the late 90s on several other big Hollywood projects. And since last week, we talked about Jurassic Park, I thought I would release the segment of the interview where I talked to Harold and Alex about the work that they did on the sequel to Jurassic Park. Yes, Jurassic Park, The Lost World. I talked to them briefly about the work they did on that film. It was a lot of fun talking to them, and instead of keeping all that to myself, I thought I'd release it now so you guys can listen to it and enjoy it. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Harold Mann and Alex Mann about their work on Jurassic Park, The Lost World. Speaking of going on to the next thing, you mentioned Lost World, Jurassic Park. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. So what were your actual duties on the Lost World, Jurassic Park, the sequel to Jurassic Park?
Yeah. I mean, put it simply, if you see a screen with anything on it, that's us.
Okay.
So we were the exclusive provider of on-set or, practical images on camera, whether hero or background. So everything in that trailer that they take out in the Winnebago that they take out into the woods, that's all us. The stuff in the office is us. And luckily, we'd made enough of a name for ourselves at that point that to be invited to bid on that show, I think you can imagine the excitement of being very young and getting a call from, Amblin.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That was my next question. So this is the sequel to literally the most successful movie ever made. Spielberg had to beat himself with E.T. So at the time in 96 or 97, whenever you joined the project, this is the sequel to the biggest film, and Spielberg is back. So what are you thinking when you get off the phone of like, oh, we have our next job? Is it, oh, a job's a job? Or are you have like, oh my God, we are going to fuck this up. Oh my God, we're going to get fired. What's going on?
It's interesting. I remember it more as a job's a job, but it was Spielberg, so that definitely catches your eye. But the enormity of it, or the oh my God, we might mess it up. Like, we were actually we were really getting better and better at what we did. Like, we knew how to assemble these things. We built some tools to make it easy for us to build these things. We were confident when we came on set to do a good job. So I think it was sort of hey, let's just make sure we price this right. We don't want to, not get the job, and then hope that we don't piss them off when we present it, or hope someone doesn't get angry on set with us. But I don't think it was sort of the enormity of it was not something that I think I felt. Alex, did you feel that kind of way?
I felt the enormity of it. Yeah. I mean, because I think there's a certain amount of your ego that it realizes, well, umpty up number of people went and saw The Net. I think a few more are going to go see this movie. Like, half the planet will eventually see the Jurassic Park sequel and the need to get it right. And I felt the burden of being on the tail end of what was a very, kind of audience impactful computer sequence from the first film, right? I mean, that was a whole different animal with the kind of the Sun Workstation, imagery, and the I don't remember who the actor was who played the computer guy, but the people remember those scenes, and so there was a certain amount of that. Luckily, the sequel wasn't computery at all. right? Even though there was tons of video, there was tons of ostensible computer stuff, actors aren't sitting down at computers and doing stuff.
Right.
That was a little bit of a load lifted because I didn't want to have to deal with following in the footsteps of the first film or trying to replicate things that existed there, which I thought was actually very...
Ironically, I would say that the computer graphic that seemed to be most interesting to Steven Spielberg was perhaps the least technically interesting graphic, but Alex was there for it, and it was pretty cool. Like you want to explain what happened on that?
Oh, the harbor shot?
Yeah, that was cool.
Are
you talking about Are you talking about the radar?
Yeah,
with the ship coming into the harbor.
Yeah,
yes.
It's like that was built kind of last minute because the script had been altered a bit as to how that would play. And they wanted a suspense creation device. We do a lot of suspense creation devices for films where it's like progress bar, copy file, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Or, fingerprint resolving. So this was another suspense device and I didn't know how they were going to shoot it. And I'm like, we just whipped together something that was like fairly, ordinary. And Mr. Spielberg was very fond of how it played. It's like, could you be fond of the thing I spent a month on instead? Maybe? Yeah. But this was rather hastily put together. We were lucky that we had certainly as a director, we didn't spend a ton of time like mano a mano. I had one trip to meet the production up in Arcata, California, in those big, beautiful forests where they were shooting the huge vehicle driving with the dinosaurs through the woods scenes. So those were all done on location at these gorgeous redwood forests. And then they just, CG'd in the dinosaurs later, but they had all the vehicles, all the, tons of people. They built a whole, production village out there. And we had nothing to do with that. But when you need to meet the director, you go to wherever the director is. So we flew up to Arcata and we showed him a couple things. Oh, that's great. Literally like 11 seconds later, I'm done and I fly home. So that was like that was the most intense collaboration on that film. We had no input really in terms of anything other than we were delivering the goods, but we weren't collaborating with, the director on how to make the show more realistic because we aren't dinosaur experts. The art department was helpful on that show for us. So they did give us some idea what they were looking for. They sent us some of the dinosaurs that would be encountered in the show. So where that, came up. And then our biggest hero graphic in the whole of the Lost World was the fractured leg of the baby dinosaur. Julianne Moore, plays a scientist and she's, got an ultrasound wand and this they bring in this, and this is an animatronic physical puppet, right, with wires leading out. And I think it was the Stan Winston people, like 11 puppeteers with joysticks and this little dinosaurs twitching and crying. And then it's this whole series of shots where it's like, lay it on the table, take the fake ultrasound wand, move it over. I'm offset with a joystick trying to match the actors left and right. You don't really we consulted a bunch of doctors. You don't really diagnose a fracture with ultrasound. You do an x-ray, that's fine. We found some kind of reasonable proxies of like human bones with real fractures, basically kind of painted that into just an art piece of a dinosaur bone with flesh and tissue around it. And that whole shot took, we probably prepped 3-4 weeks for that. And then wrote the software to track the joystick because we knew how the shot was going to go down. And then we're on set and it's like, okay, scene 42. And I have maybe 5 minutes with the actor. I go, I talk to Julianne Moore. I'm like, okay, so here's how we built this. You're going to go like this and go like this. Does that sound good? And I'm hoping I get a yes, because if I get a no, it's another month to do something else, which of course is going to happen. And it all came together. But it was like the amount of sweat on that shot was enormous because, it's like it was just a lot of moving parts. But I think it played out pretty well.
You've done the net, and like we talked about, there's obviously a couple more mil for Lost World. What can you feel that on the set?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had never been in an outdoor-indoor set before. I have.
Gotcha.
So
That's
we're
cool.
at Universal in this enormous building, and they got rain. They got, they got trees. They got a Winnebago. It's humid as hell. It's, we got
And
a
the
whole video
dinosaurs
village.
The dinosaurs are mechanical, and if they go awry, they can kill you just from a mechanical error. So you got to be. It was a little nerve-wracking being around these big things that are computer or mechanically controlled. But it was an exciting. I mean, you walk in, it's like, wow, I'm really in here. You definitely feel that, but then you go right back into, okay, I got to get to work, and I got to make sure that when I have my 15 minutes on this today of live stuff, that I don't screw it up, because there's so many people around you that are counting on you doing it right.
Tight ship on that, I'm assuming.
Boy, it moves.
I mean, they're
fast.
so professional. They are so. You're dealing with like the people at the top of their game, and you feel it, and it elevates everybody's professionalism. There was no goofing around. There was no silliness. It was like shot.
I think that
shot.
whole team had come directly off of Amistad. And I mean, they would get things in a couple of takes and moving on. It's like, wait, we all spent how long getting ready for this? And you're doing it in 2 takes and moving on. It's like, wow, okay, must be good. But the confidence level was pretty amazing. And also, the fact that there was going to be CG all over the place, they were just dialed in with that, and so early. So, the storyboarding was intense. Everything was storyboarded out very, very explicitly. And they were, put up on a wall, all these storyboards, and everyone consulted and knew what was going on. And we had never been around a production that was that pre-visualized before. That was new for us.
Something to remember about the operating systems back then. The operating systems were not as robust and mature and multi-threaded as they are now. So we would literally have to, sometimes wait for computers to restart. And you have to say to the director, like, we need a couple minutes to get everything to reload, because it wasn't instant. It wasn't flash. It was all, spinning hard drives. And we were dealing with
Macs used to crash a lot in those days. A lot.
Yeah.
In the middle of shots, they would crash. And we would push these machines to their limits with their 8-bit graphics and very limited horsepower. Computers, think of them like children or animals on set. You're not going to get perfect, reliability, please.
Right.
And that usually seemed to set the right tone.
Any anecdotes from that movie? Any nightmare scenarios from that movie? Just anything coming to mind before I move on?
I remember a young Vince Vaughn, sort of early in his career, it was just neat to sort of see him walking around. He definitely had a presence on just on the set. But I would say, just from in terms of the interaction we had with the production and with just the screens and the actors, I'd say that was a relatively, I'd say, easy movie. Although the stakes were high, but it was a relatively easy movie from a visual standpoint. There have been other movies that have been more challenging, where maybe the lead actor doesn't want to do it the way it's supposed to be done, and you're literally on set and they go, well, I think we should do it this way. That kind of thing can be just an absolute nightmare when you have to make those last minute adjustments. But I would say Lost World was a wonderful opportunity for us to, for the rest of our careers, we were able to say we did a movie with Steven Spielberg. But at the end of the day, they're just people. Sometimes people can be very kind. He was a class act. Not everybody in the industry is always a class act. And at the end of the day, it also becomes a business. And so we found ourselves being asked to bid on movies, to do projects. And we would say, okay, well, here's what we'll charge. And they say, well, we don't want to pay that. And after you've been around a certain amount of it, you don't really need the exposure anymore. So we found it just naturally tapering off, because the economics of it just weren't that attractive to us after a certain number of years. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting we would just sort of stop doing it because it wasn't worth doing. But it wasn't really worth doing because we didn't need to build our portfolio anymore.
I guess my anecdote from The Lost World was the realization working at Universal one day, and we're in these huge sets, and one of the doors were open to the building, the soundstage. And outside, I see the tram go by. And ladies and gentlemen, here, Mr. Steven Spielberg is shooting the sequel to the Jurassic Park. And I'm like, and they're pointing at us. And I'm like, oh, we're one of the animals in the zoo now. Like,
nice.
that was definitely cool. But no, I think I would agree with Harold. It was a pretty high stakes, but at the same time pretty straightforward operation. There was one issue of rights clearances on that movie that a little bit of a nerve-wracking thing. We got a call from Universal's lawyers some months later. We had found some images online of weather radar stuff, and they were in the deep background of a shot, like out of focus. Well, sure enough, University of something calls up Universal. Is that our image of the, like, oh God, So it was fine. It all worked out.
All right, there you have it. Again, a very special thanks to Harold Mann and Alex Mann. Guys, if you're listening out there, thank you again for taking the time to talk to me. I had a lot of fun. And listeners, I want to hear from you, especially if you've worked on a film. I don't care if you've worked as the first assistant director. I don't care if you've worked on it in the capacity of IT on these films, because they have an IT department as well. But I want to hear your stories. I want to talk to you about the films that you've worked on. And the best way to do that is you can reach me by comment. You can head over to thwack.com, look for Movies and Mainframes, and leave me a comment. And you can always reach me by email at moviesandmainframes@solarwinds.com. All right, everybody. Well, that's going to do it for another episode of Movies and Mainframes. We are going to log off. And until the next time, we will see you later. Bye, everyone.
Movies
And
Mainframes.